We are talking some more about Daddy's military service in the war.
How come he keeps getting older all the time?
I know. Isn't that something?
What does that do to us?
Yeah.
Well, when they sent me overseas, I left from Hamilton Field near San Francisco, and they flew us in a cargo plane to Hickam Field in Hawaii, and then there was a week. I spent a week or 10 days in Honolulu in Hickam Field. I don't know what they were doing. They were sorting us out. There were pilots and there were ground crew and there were infantry, all of us on that big plane that went over, and then they sorted us out. And anyhow, they put me on another plane and headed for indoctrination training in New Guinea. And we landed at Midway and took on fuel, and then we flew nonstop from there to Biak, which is an island on the north part of New Guinea. Well, New Guinea's all islands. This is a small island, probably only 20 miles long, maybe 10 miles across. And then they had us sitting there for a while. I think I spent about 3 weeks there with nothing to do while they were processing and looking for what places to put us, send us. But while I was there, they had a lot of beautiful coral reefs, and I managed to get a hold of some canvas tennis shoes from a supply officer. And I wear those canvas shoes with my swimsuit so I wouldn't cut my feet all up in the coral.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about beautiful tropical fish and everything. I just spent hours out there looking at those things. And of course, it was in the jungle. It was all jungle area, and get tired of that. Then I go out and they call it kunai grass. It was similar to our blacktop here, except it got about 6 foot tall, and every blade had like a razor sharp knife on it. It just cuts you to ribbons when you walk through it, you know.
Mm.
You had to wear heavy clothing to get around it, and of course it was hot and steamy and sticky. But anyhow, there's some fantastic insects there. And I remember finding centipedes, especially after night, because the water in the soil had a lot of phosphorus in it. These things would glow at night. You see them crawling. It was like electric lights on them. And those centipedes, I swear, they were probably 6 inches to 8 inches long, you know, big things crawling. And also I started catching me a supply of praying mantises to put in my mosquito net at night, so they'd kill mosquitoes in there. I don't know if I ever did or not, but I figured they got hungry enough they'd eat any mosquito that got in.
Did they have barracks for you to sleep
No,
in?
we slept in tents.
You slept in tents?
Always in tents.
What was the mess hall? Was it in a building or in a tent?
It was in a big tent.
Yeah? Yeah. Wow. When you landed in Hickam, and of course this was after the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, what did you think? I mean, was it mass destruction to do? And how long was
Hickam
it
wasn't too badly damaged. There were bullet pockmarks all over the concrete walls, you know. And the battleships, of course, were still out there in the harbor, and at that time, nobody's allowed to go out there, even us. And there wasn't a lot to see there. Hickam didn't get a lot of damage originally.
So they wouldn't let you go into Pearl City then?
No.
Into Pearl Harbor?
No. I did manage a pass to go into Honolulu, and my buddy and I were going to swim in the beach right off the hotel there, you know. Waikiki. It was the biggest disappointment in my life. They weren't maintaining them, and garbage was just everywhere.
Oh, wow.
And we had our swimming gear on, and we waded out, and we probably had to wade out a quarter of a mile, maybe farther, to find water that was deeper than over our knees. I mean, it was so disappointing.
Wow.
Of course, you got out there, then you had a few little waves and breakers.
Yeah. So New Guinea, anyway. Then how long were you in New Guinea?
Well, from Biak, they finally sent me to Nadzab, and Nadzab is on a river New Guinea, the island that we were on, I don't know what its name of it is. I don't know if I even heard it. But it's very rugged. It has, the mountains there are probably 10, 12,000 feet high. And they're just straight up cliffs.
Mm.
And then at the bottom of them, of course, there's jungle everywhere. There's heavy growth of trees and grass. At the bottom of these mountains, these cliffs, was a river that just rushed down, a real roaring river. And alongside this river is where they dozed out an airstrip for us. And the river is full of crocodiles and a lot of wild pigs in the area. And of course that kunai grass was everywhere. And I think I probably told you they made a strip with steel landing mats. And the landing mats were just hooked together. Each mat was probably, I think 3 foot wide and probably 10 foot long. And then the edges had hooks and holes where the next mat could just drop the hooks in and hold them together. And the same on the ends. But laid right on this swamp, you couldn't tell it walking on it, but taxiing over to things would go up and down, with the weight of the plane. And to try to land on that thing, you hit it and bounce. And there's nothing smooth. And that's where I got myself in trouble. We went down to the flight line and the executive officer who was checking us out, and none of us had ever flown P-51s before. And we went into this ready room, which is another little tent, and he had 6 manuals there that told about the P-51, all specifications on it. And I think there were 18 of us checking out, so that meant 3 of us to a manual. And we had, I think he gave us 2 hours to study the manual before we were going to fly the thing. And it was a hot airplane. And finally, he said, well, we can't waste any more time. It's time to start shooting some landings. So I went out and climbed in the cockpit of this plane. He climbed up on the wing, and he said, there's your landing gear, and there's your flaps. Good luck. That's all the instructions I got. But the plane had so much power that when you gave it full throttle, the plane tried to turn with the engine, and the right wing would go down. It just wanted to turn over. And it took all the strength I had in my right leg to put in enough rudder to keep that wing up level. I mean, it was brutal, and there's a big joke around the area about however all P-51 pilots had a right leg bigger than the left leg.
Yeah, more muscle.
They got more exercise.
Wow.
But I shot, and that first day all we did was take off and fly a circle pattern, they call it, and come back and land. Just out and land, just circle. And he wanted us all to get in as many landings as we could. And of course, landing on that mat, I would bounce the thing in rough, and I just very lucky that I didn't crack the thing up, And finally, after one landing, I was lucky enough, and I just stalled it out probably 5 or 6 feet above the ground. That thing dropped on 3 points right on that landing mat, and it just stuck there, just as smooth a landing as I'd ever made, I was so proud of myself. Taxiing back, I was watching the other guys landing. They were all having the same trouble. I was bouncing the thing. And I probably told you this, but the guy way up ahead of me was waiting to take off again, and I taxied right into him, chewed the tail of his plane up right up to the cockpit.
You did. You told us that earlier, but every time you tell the story, it gets a little bit different. You remember a little bit different things.
Yeah, a little different.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's when you got in trouble and had to go, they ostracized you.
They grounded me for 3 months.
Yeah.
All my buddies shipped out to their units, and I had to sit around there.
You had to stay around there. Well, where did you have to hitchhike to?
When my orders finally came, I had to hitchhike to Okinawa.
Okay.
But when we were so bored, there was another guy that had some kind of problems too, and he and I got together. They put us in the same tent, and we were looking for something to do. We'd go down to the flight line, and they had a boneyard down there. All these airplanes that were wrecked, they had them all in one area where they piled them all up, you know. And we went down there and scrounged wire and light bulbs and everything. We actually tried to rig us up electric lights for our tent, you know, so we could read at night. But the most fun we had after a mission, after a training mission, they'd come back and they'd empty all their machine gun bins. The machine guns had little compartments in the wings where they laid all this ammunition and belts out back and forth. This coiled up like a snake, you know, and fed it into the gun. When you come back from a mission, there's always little ends of that stuff left over. They just throw it in a pile down there. So my buddy and I one day, we went down there and I thought, well, it's 4th of July, let's have a celebration. And we found an old 55-gallon oil drum, gas drum, and we got a chisel and a hammer and we cut the top out of it. And then we filled that thing clear full of these leftover 50 caliber ammunition. And they're pretty big shells, about that long, you know. And some of them are armor piercing, some of them are incendiary, tracers, and all mixed up. But we had that thing clear full of ammunition, so then I went over and got 5 gallons of gasoline dumped on top of it all. And then we threw a match in it and ran like crazy. And that thing, woof, and then all these shells started exploding, boom, 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 boom. And pretty soon here comes the local fire truck, you know, and the guys were scared to go up there and put the thing out, you know. And we found out later that in the kunai grass, probably 25 feet from this barrel that was burning, they had a stack of 500-pound bombs just laying there in the grass. And that's what had them scared, you know.
Oh my God!
We didn't know they were there.
Did you get in bad trouble?
Well, we got chewed out again, pretty good.
You just got chewed out, that's all. You didn't have to do 50 laps or something?
I think that was instrumental in getting some orders cut, because we were getting in too much trouble there. They wanted to get rid of us.
Gotta get these guys out of here. It's causing too much mischief.
But that was an incident that was...
Oh,
well, another night we were sitting around in our tent, and we had a wire reel. I don't know if you've seen them, HEA, big reels about so big in diameter, and they have a hole through the center.
Right.
We found an empty wire reel like that, and we got it back to our tent. And we dismantled our tent and set this right in the center, and then on the tent pole, these are pyramid tents, and had a pole right in the center. And it threw the hole down to the ground again. And then this is our table. We sit around this table playing cards, you know, playing bridge mostly. And one night there were 4 of us sitting there playing bridge, and here comes this snake crawling up around that tent pole, and there's enough room between it and the spool. He climbed right up through that thing that was climbing on our table.
What was it?
It was a snake. Well,
a snake?
Probably a boa constrictor. I don't know.
Oh my God.
The thing was about 6 foot long, you know, about that big around.
Oh no.
Boy, did you see guys bailing out of that tent.
For heaven's sakes, he was in the wire spool? Or he
was under the tent.
He was under the tent. Oh, and he was trying to get out.
He climbed up. We'd made a wooden floor in our tent, and most of them were right on the ground, you know.
Yeah.
We scrounged some lumber and put a wooden floor in our tent. We were luxury, you know.
How'd you get rid of the boa constrictor?
I don't know. We left, and when we come back later, well, he's gone.
He was gone. Let him get out of there by himself, huh? Oh, jeez.
Well, it's funny how these are the kind of things that stick in my mind more so than...
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. Good grief.
And the natives had come around. They were actually headhunters, and that was part of their customs. And whenever these little tribes were always fighting with each other, and whenever they'd have a little battle, they'd capture somebody and kill them, then they'd eat them. They called it long pig. They were cannibals as well. And we had a P-38 pilot that went on a mission. We flew missions off of there too after we got checked out. We had a P-38 pilot come back from a mission, and he was shot up a little bit, and he didn't make it back to the base. He had to bail out. And his buddies watched him bail out and land. They come down this area where they made a note of it, and were a bunch of Aussies, Australian troops on this base also, and they were sort of a rescue team. And they knew there was a village in that area, so a group of these Aussie soldiers went over there to pick this guy up, bring him back, you know. The natives had killed him and eaten him. And it's made our commanding officer, the base commander, very angry, you know. And he had all of us guys go up with live ammunition and strafe this village to pieces. Those poor guys didn't know what we were doing. I mean, what right did he have?
You had to go up there and bomb them? All those little native people?
Shoot them with a machine gun.
Shoot them?
And I didn't do it. I just messed with my guns jammed.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a horrible thing to do.
That's a horrible thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's murder.
Sure
I mean,
is.
it's war, but still, they weren't in the war.
What they were doing was their custom, and we were interfering with their customs.
Yeah.
No, I think they figured that by eating this pilot, it was going to give them the ability to fly. They thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
People can fly in the air, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty.
And then from that same base, there's some little islands off the coast. One of them called Wewak is, probably 10 or 15 miles out in the ocean. And the Japanese had a base, and they sent us up to try to clean out the Japanese. I remember going over there and seeing their little huts down there in the jungle clearings and everything. You go strafing them, you know, and see your bullets hitting the ground, and hear this guy come running across there. I don't think I ever hit anybody, but that was my first exposure to war.
Yeah. And deliberately killing people, seeing that you're killing people.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you drop a bomb on a big field.
You don't see it.
You don't see
what
it's destroying. Yeah.
When you're shooting, you see your bullets hitting the ground, and see this guy running, trying to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I never did see any of them get hit, but of course you're just zinging and you're gone again.
Yeah.
You go over them probably 300 miles an hour.
Do you remember how many missions you had to fly off of New Guinea then?
Oh, I don't know. We flew missions over Rabaul, where the big Japanese home base was, and they had a lot of troops there, a lot of anti-aircraft, and when we'd fly missions over Rabaul, it was always a dive bomb thing, because they had ships anchored there, and we'd come over about 30,000 feet, and to dive bomb, to make a safe dive bomb, we tried to pull out about 30,000 feet.
Yikes.
Do it safely, you know. I don't think we ever hit anything.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that the Japs, of course, they had airplanes, lots of them, to come in and bomb Pearl Harbor. Then you mentioned that they didn't have that many airplanes after that. Did they have a lot of ships, or because you didn't have?
Yeah, these were Navy warships.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were, cruisers, destroyers.
Yeah.
And Rabaul is a great harbor. It's a big, actually there's a huge volcanic explosion there at one time. I don't know how many millions of years ago, but it just blew the whole top of this mountain out, and there's nothing left but this ring. In the center was all this water, you know, with an opening from the ocean there.
Yeah.
An ideal harbor, and the Japanese bring their warships in there to refuel and to sort of store them, overhaul them, I guess, and everything. And that's what we were after, trying to bomb those warships. And I don't think we ever did hit them, because they had lots of anti-aircraft there. I mean, when that anti-aircraft stuff, you know, they weren't shooting at you, but they'd all shoot straight up in the air. And you come into this area, you can just see this big outline, square outline over the ships, of just solid black puffs, black smoke. You know? And that was the anti-aircraft shells exploding. No way you could fly through that. And we didn't even try. We had more.
Yeah, no way.
We weren't suicide missions. But whenever you had found that heavy flak, you know there's something they really wanted to protect there.
Yeah. Did you ever have the potential of being transferred to Alaska, to ADAC, or any of those, or Listen Chain?
We never had a choice.
Yeah.
In fact, they were screaming for pilots all over the South Pacific. But see, the war had been going on for quite a while, and this is just before it ended. And all these guys had been there for years, and their time was up. They need to go home, and all they needed was replacements so they could send them home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were. We were the replacements.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I know when I finally got to, I told you about hitchhiking to
Right.
Okinawa. When I got there, well, because two other guys come in about the same time I did, and we found different rides. But anyhow, those three that we replaced were so glad to see us. They got on the next available flight. We're out of it. Headed
Yeah,
home.
yeah, we're gone. So in actuality then, just to clarify it, how long were you actually, how many months or years were you actually over there, do you remember?
I was overseas, I think about 13 months.
About 15 months?
13.
13 months?
And I was probably in New Guinea 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Okinawa 3 or 4 months. The rest of the time I was in Japan.
In Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So during all of this time, did you ever have any leave where you got to go home for
No.
any length of time?
Mm-mm. After the war ended, I got an R&R. I couldn't leave the area.
Yeah.
A buddy and I went to this hotel in Mount Fuji, the base of Mount Fuji,
Yeah.
called the Fuji View Hotel.
Fiji View?
And it was a beautiful view of Mount Fujiyama.
Yeah.
And they had, the thing that I remember most about it was we had these clean rooms to sleep in, clean sheets.
After sleeping in a tent and
Not you sleeping in a tent, you know.
bugs, yeah.
And every evening they had what they called a sukiyaki dinner. Our dinner was, I don't know, it was some kind of a special occasion. I don't know what the occasion was, but sukiyaki, I don't know. I imagine they still go to a Japanese restaurant in this country and have them. But you sit at this table on the floor, with your knees crossed and sitting on the table,
Mm-hmm.
under the table. And parts of it had a dip in the floor where you could put your feet down. And they had the heaters in there, charcoal heaters. But anyhow, this sukiyaki would he'd serve you all kinds of raw vegetables and meat, along with sake, rice wine. And they had a little charcoal stove right at each plate, and you cooked your own meal.
Oh my.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You know.
Did the geisha girls serve you?
Geisha girls served us.
Yeah.
And there's another big misnomer. They were not prostitutes. They were nothing but waitresses.
Yeah.
They were just trained to be waitresses all their life.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And entertainers, so they would sing and dance, but their prime duties was just to take care of you, wait you.
Oh, yeah.
That was interesting. It wasn't too exciting. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. So you were there.
We
What
had
were
a
you
week
doing
there.
there? Did you fly out of there on missions?
No,
or
we had.
you mostly
I had my own Jeep there, and Walt Baker and I, we just took my Jeep and went down to Mount Fujiyama, and to this hotel. We made reservations through. I can't remember how that worked either.
This was after the war, so
After
this
the
was your
war.
R&R after the war.
Yeah. Yeah, once we left Okinawa, the war was over. We didn't leave Okinawa until it was over.
Yeah.
We had some interesting times in Okinawa. There was heavy fighting going on the north end of the island, and our base was probably right in the middle of the island. And there's a big horseshoe bay there, and our base was right at the edge of this bay. In fact, our runway was. We take off one direction, we go right over the bay on takeoff.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of the bay then was, there's still fighting in the hills there, and just lots of Japanese hold up there. In fact, Okinawans are really just Japanese. They call them Okinawans because that's where they live, but they were part of the Japanese, what do you want to call it? Okinawa is not a race of its own. They're Japanese.
Yeah.
Just like Koreans are different than Japanese.
Yeah, right.
Anyhow, on this island of Okinawa, it's not very big. It's probably not more than 30 or 40 miles long, and maybe anywhere from 2 to 10 miles across. Long, slender thing, and it has hills, ridges, and we weren't allowed to send any pictures home from there because the vegetation, the trees that grew on there, it's the only place in the world these particular trees grew. And anybody that knew anything about biology would know from looking at a picture where they come from. But these hills were, they weren't too big. They're probably, maybe 200 or 300 feet to maybe 500 feet. And they're just pockmarked with caves everywhere, all over the whole island. And on the north part of the island, the Japanese were retreating, had just infiltrated these caves, and of course they'd added to them. They had tunnels connecting all these caves underground.
Oh my gosh.
And it was almost impossible to get them out. And infantry, we'd had some bad experience with the infantry. Guys trying to napalm bomb these cave mouths had actually dropped the bombs on their own people, Had a lot of friendly casualties that way. So in order to make us more aware of that, they sent, I don't know how many of us, I know I was one of them, but we had to go spend a week with the infantry, live with these guys while they were attacking these caves.
Ooh.
And talk about a dirty, stinky, filthy job. They didn't even have a tent to sleep in. They slept right out in the ground every night. And of course the Japanese were always infiltrating, so they had these tripwires all over the area. It was just a wire fastened to a tin can with some pebbles in it. Anybody would stumble over the thing, it'd rattle it. And everybody started shooting in that direction.
Oh my.
And of course it was raining there almost continually. You're in your rain gear, and you're sweaty, and you're stinky, and you're dirty and miserable.
Oh.
I felt so sorry for those guys.
Oh God.
I really appreciated the life I had. But anyhow, it made us much more cautious about where we dropped our bombs.
Yeah, yeah.
Because those trees down there, there's guys under those trees.
Yeah, yeah.
But when they'd wanna, we finally rigged up a system. When they wanted a napalm drop, they'd call us on the radio. And of course, they'd get our base commander, our operations officer, and he'd decide how many ships it would take. So there'd be a bunch of us waiting in the ready room. He'd say, you and you go. And they'd tell us what channel to get a hold of the military on. And we'd have 2 napalm bombs. And when we get in the air, then we'd call the infantry commander and ask him to give us a signal, a smoke bomb. And he'd shoot a smoke shell right in the mouth of that cave. We'd see the smoke go up in the air, and that's where we'd drop our bomb. Skip moment. We'd come in probably about 300 miles an hour, just above the treetops, headed right for that smoke, and we'd drop our bomb so it would hit just in front of the mouth of the cave, and then it'd slide in. And once it's inside, then it'd explode, and it generated so much heat that they told us that it took all the oxygen out of the air, and anybody in those caves would suffocate. And we did a lot of that kind of stuff.
That was your primary missions then, huh?
Well, that was one of them. Also, we flew missions off of Okinawa. See, there's our squadron has fighter group has 3 squadrons of 16 airplanes each, so that makes 48 airplanes in the group. And one squadron would probably have this infantry duty one day, and then the other 2 would go on a mission somewhere. And our missions were mainly over mainland Japan or over China. We were probably 400 or 500 miles from the coast of China. We flew a lot of missions over Hong Kong and the Chinese coast, and all up and down the Chinese coast, looking for what they call sugar charlies, which were little fishing boats, like a commercial fishing boat that comes in here, maybe a couple 100 feet long, you know. And these boats would be carrying all kinds of cargo back to mainland Japan. Because they had no production of their own. They had to buy everything. Everything had to come from outside. No raw materials or anything. So we were always, one squadron was always out looking for what they call a sugar charlies. This was considered sort of a pushy job, you know, to shoot up those boats. They did have machine guns on them, and they'd shoot back at us, but we had our guns converging at 750 yards, and you take 6 50 caliber machine guns, and the shells in those things are about that long and probably that big around.
Tiny.
And we could load them anywhere we wanted to. I think I asked for mine to be every 6 shell. I wanted to be an API, armor piercing incendiary, and actually they would burn. You could, like a tracer. You could see where you were shooting. And we always kept our guns synchronized so that at 750 yards they all come together. And you can imagine 6 machine guns firing, hitting that same diameter, that same circle of a foot, you know.
Yeah.
And you try to shoot that ship right at water level and just blow a big hole in the side of it.
Oh, like, yeah.
I mean, they just go down like a rock.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was considered a pretty cushy job. And then the other squadron is usually on what they call missions of opportunity. And when you flew one of those, where you flew over mainland Japan, and we'd spread out to be 16 ships, maybe a quarter of a mile between, just spread out in a big long line. And we just go all up the island. Anything that's worth shooting, we just shoot it as we went by. And that was fun too.
Yeah.
Especially when you could find a train going down a track. They were sure fun to shoot the boiler, the engine and those things. The boiler would explode then.
From way up there in the sky, all of those look like little toys.
Yeah. Of course, we were doing it from treetop level.
Yeah.
When they blow up, I mean, you didn't want to go through that.
You better get out of the way.
And we had a lot of guys, not a lot, but several guys flew into power lines, and that cracked up, didn't come back. And then there's always missions escorting bombers. The B-29s and the B-17s and the B-24s were forever firebombing Tokyo or any big city. They'd go over there and just drop thousands of these bombs, incendiary bombs. In Tokyo, when the war was finally over and we moved in there, we were probably 30 miles from Tokyo, and you could look clear across this million population city and see nothing but a chimney here and there. Everything just leveled down, just burnt to crisp.
Oh my.
Just totally leveled that city.
Wow.
But when the bombers went over, well, somebody had to escort them just in case they had any planes to send up. The bombers are pretty easy to shoot down, especially when they were in a bombing run.
Yeah.
And they didn't fly all that high. They come in their bombing run probably 8,000 or 10,000 feet. And that was a boring job because the bombers were so slow. We'd have to S back and forth. And otherwise, our cruising speed was so fast that we couldn't fly slow enough to stay with them.
Yeah, yeah.
So we just circled around and do anything we could to
stay up with
kill
them.
speed.
Oh my goodness.
That's one of the missions that stands out for me was on the first part of August, the 3rd of August, I think it was. They sent us to dive bomb a tunnel that went under the inland sea between the island of Honshu and Kyushu, because the Japanese had a railroad line going under the water to connect these two islands for supplies to go back and forth. And the end of one of these tunnels was Hiroshima, and they sent us to dive bomb that tunnel the same afternoon. That the morning they dropped the atomic bomb in the morning, and we went over at 1 o'clock to dive bomb.
Got 'em all.
The right hand didn't know what the left was doing.
Oh, goodness.
We didn't know what it was all about, but it was at 20,000 feet where we was going to start a dive bomb run. We had to go on instruments. It was so dusty, you couldn't see anything. Visibility was nothing.
Yeah.
Another strange thing about it, there's no anti-aircraft, no flak up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've all been wiped out.
Yeah. I'm like, what in the world is this? What is all that?
We had aboard our mission. We couldn't see the target.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Yeah. My goodness. Now, you obviously communicated airplane to airplane since there was 16 of you in your squadron. Did you have radios that you could? Did you have like a code name?
Yeah. Every mission we had a different name. Tokyo Rose always seemed to know who we were, though.
Yeah.
Our squadron, every squadron had different colored spinners on the propeller, and the 39th squadron had red spinners, and the 40th had yellow spinners, and I think we had blue spinners at the 41st. And Tokyo Rose says, "Well, I see my friends with the blue spinner Mustangs are over to see us again today. I just want you to know that you didn't do a bit of harm to us."
Yeah.
She played the best music, though.
Yeah.
All this modern stuff that we were used to listening to.
Yeah. Well, are we about to recap our military?
Well, from
I'm sure there's a lot more stories in there.
there's a lot of stories. I may have told you a little bit when I was on Okinawa. In fact, when I joined the outfit, my relief, the guy that I sent home, that I took his place, was the engineering officer, and he's the paddlefoot. Which meant that he wasn't a flying officer; he was just a straight line officer. He's in charge of the maintenance of all the airplanes, 16 airplanes. So when I come in there, he got to go home, and I took his place. And so I had to be in charge of all these maintenance of these 16 airplanes, which didn't amount to a whole lot because the crew chiefs knew a lot more than I ever knew about the airplanes, and they just come to me when I needed something signed off or something to keep it legal.
Mm-hmm.
But every time they put a new engine in an airplane or overhaul an engine, you'd have to have 5 hours of slow time on it before we put it back in the line for it to fly missions. In other words, break it in. And I had to go up and fly slow time on every engine that was overhauled, and that got so boring, you know. And what they'd do up there is, and it had to be 5 hours time on it to keep it legal. I'd just go up there and fly around in circles at half throttle for 4 or 5 hours, you know, to get all that time on them. But we had a notice that there was a typhoon headed our way. We had 2 or 3 days notice. So the Navy brought all of their warships in the area into this bay that was right at the end of our runway, you know, as a protected harbor. And it wasn't too deep. I think it was, they could anchor in there anyhow. I don't know how deep they could go. But I was up there slow timing a plane, and I seen this little baby battleship, baby aircraft carrier. It came in and anchored in the bay out there. And it was about half the size of a regular aircraft carrier. And so I flew down to examine it a little bit. You know, I was flying right on the water and looking up at the deck, and all these sailors were on the deck waving at me. And I thought, well, let's have a little fun here.
Oh,
I pulled it up and dropped the wheels and flaps to come in like I was going to land on the thing. I started shooting red flares and waving red flags. And they didn't want no part of that. And I couldn't have done it anyhow.
So as you flew over the aircraft carrier, did you waggle your wings at them?
Yeah.
How scared you?
Yeah. I thought I'd get in trouble over that one. I didn't hear anything
You
from
didn't hear
it.
anything on that one, huh?
Of course, I'm sure that they didn't have presence of mind to take my numbers off my plane. So.
Yeah. 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 Huh.
Then when this typhoon was on the way, well, I had 16 airplanes I had to protect from the weather. I mean, the winds were predicted to be between 150 and 200 miles an hour. And so I didn't know what to do about it. And we got to talking with the CO and everything. And so we decided to tie them all down with bombs. So we requisitioned some 6x6 trucks, and all the mechanics and I went out, and we brought truckload after truckload of 500-pound bombs in, and we put 3 bombs under each side of the wing, 3 bombs under the right wing, 3 bombs under the left wing, and 3 bombs at the tail.
Mm.
We tied them all together and then tied the airplane to those bombs so the wind wouldn't blow them away. And actually, we knew the direction that the wind would probably be, so we had them all facing into the wind. They were all in revetments to start with, which were little, what do you call it, the parking area that we built up with sandbags around it so that they couldn't come in and strafe it and get all the airplanes again. And of course this protected them from the wind quite a bit too. But when that typhoon hit then, I was in my tent, and the 6 of us in this pyramid tent, and we were just going to sweat it out in the tent. We didn't know what else to do, you know. And pretty soon the canvas ripped, and the tent flew to pieces, and then the canvas had chains in it to tie it down on the corner, on the pyramid side. And those chains are flopping in the wind, so we bailed out of there in a hurry. And like I said, these hills were all full of caves, and our tent area was sitting on top of a little rise there. It had a nice view of the whole area. So we dove out of that tent and went down into this ravine, and there's a hole in the wall, in a cave, probably 3 or 4 foot square. It had a big rock in front of it, and 2 or 3 of us rolled that rock aside and climbed in there. And the Okinawans were using them for tombs. They buried their family members. Each family had their own tomb in a cave there. And we climbed in there, and there were benches carved out of the stone. And I think there's about 3 tiers of benches there. And then there were urns sitting all over the place. And we discovered later that the eldest daughter of the family, on a certain day of the year, sort of like a Memorial Day, would go in there, and she would, the bones that were in these urns were full of bones, human bones, and she would open up the bones, urns, and polish all the bones and put them back in, and laying on these benches were different stages of decomposition. The bugs were eating the flesh off of these.
Ooh.
And the smell was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, we spent 3 days in there. We were very glad to be there.
Glad to have the shelter, but whoa, nothing like walking into a graveyard.
We really didn't know what we were getting into.
Mm.
Of course, we had a similar thing in our tent. We'd made a floor. My buddy Walt and I took my Jeep, and we went out and scrounged for lumber when we first moved in there. And we found this big, beautiful pile of lumber there, boards, probably 1x8s and 1x10s, and a lot of 2x4s. And we took a trailer back, and we just loaded that thing up with lumber so we could put a floor in our tent. And we got it all loaded up. And some Marine sitting on top of a lumber pile says, "Okay, you guys can just unload it again." Except there was a rifle pointed to us. He's just doing his job, and we did.
Oops.
We went back later and talked them out of it, though. Anyhow, we had a floor in our tent, and we noticed it was something smelled terrible, you know. And we found a spot in the floor, and we ripped up a couple of boards there, and there's a foot come up out of sand. A Jap soldier had been buried there, just barely covered up.
Oh my God.
And I guess the wind and everything is starting to bring it up, but we got some dirt and covered it up again to keep the smell down.
Ooh, that's horrible.
Of course, our bunks, our cots, we had these canvas cots, and they were spread all around the edge of the tent so we could get the fresh breeze, the air. And right outside of the floor of the tent, we all dug a hole out there, a foxhole. So when they started, anything happened, we just rolled out of our sack into the foxhole. Because every night there's a Japanese plane would come over and bomb us. Same time, same plane. And
Did he miss you every time?
He never did hit anybody.
Yeah.
The biggest problem was that every night he'd come over, all the anti-aircraft in the island would start shooting at him.
Yeah.
And nobody ever hit him either.
Oh my God.
But all that stuff that goes up's got to come down again.
Yeah.
And it's that flak coming back down, hitting the ground, but where it does.
Yeah.
But we take our steel helmets and bail out into that foxhole every time that guy'd fly over.
Well, that's true. And I was just thinking about when you were on the ground and not flying, you were in enemy territory. How often did the Japanese?
Like I say, there was
like
heavy
that?
fighting just across the bay from us. In fact, we could hear it and see it at night, see the flashes and everything. And there was always some Japanese soldier infiltrating, trying to do his last duty before he died, I guess.
Yeah.
And one night one of them came by and he threw a hand grenade in our tent. And it rolled out in that wooden floor right in the middle of the tent. Boy, we dove into those foxholes. I think we stayed there about an hour. It never did go off. It was a dud. But we sounded the alarm, and we hollered, and everybody was alerted to that there's an infiltrator in the camp. And I didn't know they had all these searchlights, but they turned the lights on and everything. And finally, some guy spotted him. He was out in the water swimming.
Oh.
And every one of us, of course, we were issued only handguns. We were issued was a .45 pistol, and the thing was so hard to shoot that you could throw it straight and you could shoot it. Nobody could ever hit anything with that thing. We were always out there, bang, 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 just guy in the water. And actually, he washed up the next morning. Somebody had hit him. He washed up on the beach the next morning.
Wow. Sounds like you saw a few dead bodies then while you were over there.
Yeah. That was kind of an eye-opener, too, since some of the Marines that were supposedly guarding our camp found that body the next morning, and they were out there that had this dead soldier's mouth open. They were trying to pry his gold teeth out. And one of them was cussing like mad because it dropped down the guy's throat and he couldn't get it.
Oh.
You want a souvenir?
Oh. That sounds like something in the movies.
Plain sickening.
I didn't think people were that crude.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I think the Japanese probably suffered as much as we did as prisoners of war.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of guys just have no morals at all.
Boy, I guess not. Wow. As nice a guy as you were, I'm really surprised that you even... Of course, you were drafted, so you didn't have much choice.
I didn't have much choice.
Yeah.
Well, I was on Okinawa, though. I got word that my brother Wayne was there. He's in the MPs. And he was stationed over on the other side of the island.
Oh.
And I took my Jeep one day and went over to visit him. And he didn't appreciate it. He says, would you mind taking your shirt off? He says, we don't like officers around here.
Because you were a lieutenant and he was what?
He was a private.
Private?
Private first class.
Yeah. In what was he in?
MPs, military police.
Military police. Oh.
Could have been the guy up on that lumber pile. No, he was black. The guy that made us unload that lumber.
So what branch of the service is the military police then?
They're attached to every branch.
I see.
Infantry, Air Force, artillery. They all have their own military police. I don't know who. I think he was with an Air Force unit.
Yeah. So why didn't he like lieutenants, officers?
Well, it's pretty when you're in the infantry like that. It's pretty hard to get promotions.
Yeah.
Our promotions come with the job.
Yeah.
And when we got our wings, we automatically become an officer.
Uh-huh.
And of course, along with that went hazard pay. We got time and a half. In other words, first lieutenant made $300 a month normally, and we got $300 plus $150 because flying is considered a hazard. So I was making about somewhere between $400 and $500 a month, which is good money then.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
I had it all sent home to Mary.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Were you able to correspond with Mom at all?
Yeah.
Did,
Mail was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised.
yeah.
It was delayed, but they all come through. I mean, she'd write a letter, and I'd probably get it 2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
But they all came through.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I bet she was just worried silly. 15 months, that's a long time.
It's a long time.
Especially when you were newlyweds, when you got drafted off. Well, that's interesting that you met Wayne over there, though. So did you visit very long, or did you actually just leave? And
No, in fact, his outfit was shipping out the next day. I don't know where they were going.
Yeah.
Back to
Yeah.
Manila or someplace.
Yeah. Had he just joined then at that point, do you think? Or
No,
had,
he'd been there with them. I think he'd been overseas about 6 months when I
Yeah.
seen him.
And during this time, you were what, like 20, 21?
Yeah, I was 20 when I was drafted. I was probably 21.
21? Yeah. Just a kid.
Just a kid.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah, they wanted kids that
They didn't have no sense.
didn't have any sense. Yeah.
Just like when we'd take off on a long mission, we'd have, I remember one mission we had 2 500-pound bombs, right under each wing, and had a belly tank for fuel, and it had probably 500 gallon of fuel in it. And we get ready to take off. We're a pretty heavy load for that little airplane, you know. So there's all the guys in my flight for us sitting there at the end of the runway waiting to take off. And one of the guys, the flight leader, says, "Everybody in the pool today?" "Yep, I'm in. Okay." So he took off first, and we all tried to turn. The tower sit right in the middle of the runway, halfway down the runway. And it was on the stilts. It's probably 30 feet in the air. And the runway is only a mile long, 5,000-foot runway, which wasn't too long. And we tried to take off and turn before we got to the tower.
Oh, okay. That was a challenge?
That was a challenge, see who could do it. And of course the guys in the tower scared them to death. They jumped out of that thing. And we all made it.
You all made it?
The plane just shuddered.
Oh, God, yes. So as you take off, there's 16 of you, and you're just all following one another. I mean, how far down the runway before the next one starts?
We take off 2 at a time.
2 at a time.
Yeah. And
do you both go the same direction when you get airborne?
once we get airborne, we turn, and then we start making a big circle.
Uh-huh.
And we all join up with each other in the circle.
Yeah.
Then when we're flying our mission, on the way to the mission, we have each squadron has its own planes together, and we're not a military mission squad formation is a very loose formation, and you're probably no closer than a quarter of a mile to your wingman.
Yeah.
And this is in case you run across any enemy action. He's going to come at one plane. He can't shoot more than one. You know?
That's true.
So everybody else turns into him. And this gives you room to turn and protect each other.
Right.
But you see all these things in the movies were all stacked up like
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Man, you'd be a dead duck.
Yeah, that's not always true.
Not true. Those are strictly for show.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of those in Japan. So General MacArthur, he loved to put on airs.
Yeah.
He was the biggest egotist there ever was. We had a 48 ship show formation, and we had 3 groups of 16, and we were doing aerobatics in formation, 16 planes.
Wow.
We do loops, whole work. I remember we were diving for a loop, and I happened to be down the line a ways. I don't remember what my position was, but that day I couldn't get my canopy closed. And roll it shut, it was just a crack that far. I couldn't get it all the way shut because I couldn't lock it. And we started out, I think, about 10,000 feet. He was diving to get speed, and it's going to be 2 4-ship loops. Clark and all his dignitaries down there on the ground, you know. And going down to pick up speed, my canopy come off. Just the wind just sucked it off and tore it loose. And of course, it tried to pull me out of the plane. I had my helmet, my goggles on. I think, if I remember right, it stripped my goggles off too. But I couldn't see nothing, you know. I couldn't control it, and
Yikes.
I just eased out of the formation. Slightly to see what had happened. He says, go home if you can make it. I did.
Did you slip out of there? Wow.
But that was,
Wow, that's scary. I mean, you probably just hoped that wouldn't happen, even though you probably, you know,
I
when
shouldn't have went.
Yeah.
No, I should have
Yeah.
aborted the mission.
Yeah.
But we were told at the beginning, he says, now you guys are all going, and at the time, most of the mechanics had gone home, and every pilot had to crew his own plane.
Yeah.
And most of them didn't know beans about mechanics.
Yeah.
In fact, we went on another show mission, and I think 6 guys forgot to take the pitot covers off. And I don't know if you've ever seen this little thing that sticks out in front of the wing, and it's just a little pipe that sticks out.
Yeah.
And the wind, as you're flying, runs into this pipe, and that tells you how fast they're going. So it just runs your airspeed
Yeah.
indicator. Well, the thing has a lot of little bitty pinholes in it to keep the bugs and stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're on the ground, the first thing you do is they have a little cover that slips right over that pitot tube,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a red flag hanging down on it. So you can see it real easy, and you won't forget to take it off.
Right.
Well, 6 guys forgot to take those things off.
Oh, no.
They got up in the air, and they had no speed. They didn't know how fast they were going. And talk about trying to get them down on the ground. Man, they tried to land at 200 miles an hour.
Oh,
They
wow.
was going to stall out, you know.
Wow, that's really dangerous.
So it was disastrous. So finally, there was 2 or 3 of us on the ground, and we decided, and we went up, and we're going to fly them in. And we'd get one guy on our wing, and then we'd come in just like we were going to land, and he'd just duplicate everything. So he knew if we stalled out, he wouldn't stall out until we did. And we got them all down like that, and there's actually no serious damage except for one guy. His name was Wang, and he got down on the ground, and his engine was overheating. Apparently he'd been, I don't know what he did wrong, but it was in the red line, his engine. He was afraid it was going to catch fire. He was smoking like crazy when he finally got on the ground. So somebody landed with him, and the guy that landed with him took off again to go pick up another guy.
Mm-hmm.
But this Wang, his engine was, he thought it was on fire, so the thing was still taxiing. He didn't shut it off or anything. He just pulled the canopy back and jumped out. And he had his parachute on, and that stupid plane went up there and turned around and started falling. He was running like crazy trying to get away from that airplane. Every time every time he'd turn, the plane would turn, falling just like it knew. And finally, that parachute banging him in the legs, he fell down, and the plane come right up to him and stopped. It was the strangest thing.
Don't leave me.
It didn't hurt a thing.
I'll be darned. Yeah, that
Well,
was
I tell you, everybody in that outfit laughed at that guy.
Yes, they were. That guy plane's out to get me. Oh, isn't that funny?
But it had a mind of its own.
A spooked plane. A haunted plane. Oh my gosh.
We had a woman enlisted man. I don't remember what his job was. He was a staff sergeant. He's one of these kind of guys that knows everything, you know, got all the answers always. And one day he wanted to ask me if I would take him up and fly him around Mount Fujiyama. He wanted to see it. And we had these little trainer planes, AT-6s there. I think we had 2 of them. And they had to have time put on them too. Anyhow, I said, well, and he says, how about take me over and so I can get some pictures from inside Mount Fujiyama and maybe some aerobatics on the way home. I said, well, in the back seat, I says, You can get pretty sick doing aerobatics and sitting in the back seat. Oh, I don't get sick. No problem. I said, well, if I take you, you've got to guarantee that you clean up the plane if you get sick. Okay. So you can't make me sick. Nothing you can do to make me sick. I said, that's easy. And I thought, well, I'll fix you. And I went up and I started doing uncoordinated rolls. In other words, I didn't use the rudder or anything. The plane was just flopping all over the
Oh,
air.
gosh.
And pretty soon I looked back there and he's even like that all over. Anybody would got sick then. But he cleaned it up. And you know, that guy never did, it kind of changed his personality after that. He wasn't a knower everything after that.
Yeah.
I told him afterwards, I says, you know, that was a dirty trick I played on you because you can make anybody sick in the back seat there by not flying.
But you don't get so sick in the front seat.
No, because I know what's coming up.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing it. He doesn't know what I'm going to do next.
Well, did you let him take pictures before he got sick?
Yeah, he got
okay.
his pictures.
Oh, funny.
Well, Mount Fujiyama is pretty interesting. You see pictures of it. It's a perfect cone, volcanic cone.
Yeah.
Around the rim, the Japanese had built hotels, big resort hotels around the rim of this thing. And it's probably over a mile in diameter. And we used to fly down inside and fly around the inside of the thing.
Oh, my gosh.
And look up at these hotels and everything.
Oh, neat.
It's,
I wonder if it's still like that.
yeah, it's
today.
still like that.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like to go back to Japan someday? And
I often would have liked to.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like I got that sword up there. I'd love to have taken it back to the people that gave it to me.
Yeah, that's right.